Hi everyone, Andrei here, and it is good to be back. I know it's been a while since I've posted some original game content, but I can promise you I have never stopped making games. So recently, I've noticed a ton of grapple hook Unity games being made, especially clones of each other. And I couldn't really figure out why this was until I did some digging and found a tutorial that came out a couple of years ago that got over 700,000 views. Now, I never saw this video, and I didn't really spend much time looking for other indie games on YouTube over the past few years, but once I saw this one recently, it got me thinking about this game that I made back in 2019, and I thought you'd all enjoy it. So, my game, I originally was trying to make a ninja grapple hook fighting game, and it was only a prototype, but it was for desktop and console with full compatibility for mouse and keyboard, as well as Xbox and PlayStation controllers. And since I revisited the game recently and had a spark of inspiration to polish it up, I thought I'd start sharing my development updates, since I know that's why a large portion of my subscribers are following me in the first place. So, let's jump in. In this first video, I want to focus specifically on the ninja side with the grapple hooks and the swords and the shurikens, as it's been the focus of the core gameplay loop, and I've been trying to expand outwards from here. Now, originally this was intended to be a multiplayer game where you have multiple objectives in a large-scale war with tons of AI swinging around trying to stop you, while all hell breaks loose with the weather causing dangerous storms, winds, and other crazy hazardous conditions, forcing you, the player, to take cover or go underground as opposed to flying through the sky. So the first tests that I did were to see if I could get the player swinging around with a sword, firing grapple hooks at the cubes all around the environment, having some basic enemies to fight, also doing the same and firing grapple hooks around the scene. The giant monster in the background was a test to see if the player could grapple all the way to the top. Spoilers, I could not. But this ninja idea had potential, so I asked myself, what else would be fun? Wall running. Something about jumping back and forth between walls and getting that perfect strike felt like it would be so satisfying, so I got to work. The initial tests were meh. It felt slow and clunky, but it was getting there slowly. After playing around with it for a while, I eventually got it to feel good enough for the first tests, so I decided to move on. The wall running was working at this point, but it was still very hard to navigate in air using a fixed grapple rope because the enemies were moving around too fast. So I added the most logical solution: grapple reels and hooking onto enemies. This ended up being super fun and making a huge difference in the gameplay because now you no longer had to be exactly precise with your hits, and it still made slicing aliens in half very satisfying. The game was starting to feel more like a well-oiled machine and less like a game whose features were created by putting a bunch of names in a hat and pulling them out at random. Now, the sword combat was still feeling clunky at this point, so I redid it and allowed charge-up attacks. And the attack hitbox would increase in size depending on the speed of the player moving through the air. So you're able to land those slices easier even if you're moving super fast, so it kind of gives the illusion that you're more accurate, even if you're not. Part of updating the combat was also allowing the player to cut the cables of the enemies that were swinging throughout the air. So if they're coming by, but you're not quite able to reach them, you can cut their cable and they will fall and make a sound before they try and shoot another cable and regain their control. So I mentioned that there are hazardous environments. So my first test was to create really strong winds that would force all the players and gravity to basically move sideways, causing unique challenges for gameplay and forcing players to change their strategy until the storm passes. Now, it doesn't really have a lot of practical use right now in the game itself, but it was a fun test, so I wanted to include it, and it's still there in the prototype. Now, all of the development time on this project has been spent on the gameplay itself. That's why everything that you see looks like you've seen from the asset store, and that's because it is from the asset store. So just want to throw a disclaimer out there. It was time to polish up the animations and start making everything feel more intense. So I updated all the animations for the sword and the camera to react more realistically to player input, with small touches like the camera field of view increasing while on walls to give the illusion of speed. I then increased the movement speed of everything in the scene to increase the sense of urgency and intensity, and while it made moving in the air more fun, being able to precisely land where you want was still a challenge. So I added Mantling, which is very forgiving if you're not an Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics who sticks the landing every time. Now I have to talk about the aim assist. This was a very, very important feature that was desperately needed in order to make the game not frustrating on handheld. If you're moving around really fast, it's very easy to not precisely aim at a grapple point when you're trying to fire. So I built a system that's constantly checking raycast hit points surrounding the center reticle to see if you're close to an object that can be grappled. If so, the cursor turns green. Adding this was like night and day on both handheld and keyboard and mouse. My inspiration for this was the Spider-Man games, where you don't really have to think about where the web is shooting, but instead just where you want to go. So if I'm able to capture that feeling even just a little bit, players can focus more on combat and combining perfect swings to get the satisfying slices instead of just trying to make sure that they don't fall all the way to the ground or off the map. Now, I was getting pretty tired of the environment at this point because they look super janky, so I made a new training course using Pro Builder to test the features in core gameplay. Here is how it ended up. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe with the bell notification on to get notified when I post more development updates. Now, this isn't the end of development. There isn't only one type of ninja, and the enemies aren't moving in the training course. So in the next update, I'll show you some more player classes that I've been working on with different weapons, abilities, and movement. There's more to come for this game, so stay tuned.